Clint Eastwood didn't come for theater. He came for truth. The corridors of the Hollywood studio pulsed with movement, a cacophony of rushed footsteps and radio static. But through the noise strode a singular, quiet force, Clint Eastwood. At 93, he didn't require introduction. He carried his identity in the weight of every deliberate step. Dressed in a tailored gray suit that did little to conceal the grit beneath, Clint entered the green room like a man arriving at a duel, not an interview. His assistant, Renee, remained a shadow at his side. A former studio fixer, now fiercely loyal to Eastwood, she gave one last warning to the segment producer. Mr. Eastwood is here to talk about his film, not to do tricks, not to wear hats. Don't mistake his patience for play. The producer offered a nervous laugh, but his eyes drifted to a stack of cue cards in a desk drawer where a prop cowboy hat waited. The goal was always virality, and they thought Eastwood's legendary temper could deliver just that. Jimmy Kimmel's voice boomed from the monitor. His opening monologue tore through headlines and celebrity scandals with surgical sarcasm. The crowd howled with laughter. Clint sat unmoving, sipping black coffee like it was gunpowder. His fingers tapped the armrest, a quiet rhythm that Renee instantly recognized. "They're going to push it," she whispered to no one in particular. Moments later, the band struck a Western-inspired cue. Jimmy grinned into the camera. He's an icon, a legend, and possibly the only man alive who could survive an apocalypse with just a horse and a glare. "Give it up for Clint Eastwood." The crowd erupted. Clint entered with the steady, weighty presence of a man walking into enemy territory. He shook Jimmy's hand with a grip forged from decades of calloused experience. Jimmy winced. Clint sat without a word. "Welcome, sir," Jimmy said, trying to set the tone. "You're here with a new film. Tell us what it's about." Clint leaned in. "It's about ownership and honor, about not letting suits steal your land just because they have bigger wallets." His voice was low, almost gravel, but it filled the studio with a quiet authority. The crowd leaned forward. Jimmy offered a tight nod. "Sounds intense," he said, "but I gotta ask, do you still ride horses or is it golf carts these days?" A ripple of laughter from the audience. Clint didn't smile. "When it matters," he said flatly. Jimmy blinked. "Tough as ever. Okay, here's one I heard. Some scuffle on a movie set back in the day. True? Didn't happen?" The temperature dropped. Jimmy laughed nervously and reached below the desk. "Well, look what we dug up. Thought we'd take a stroll down memory lane." He pulled out the cowboy hat. The audience clapped. "Just one pic for social. What do you say, Clint?" Clint didn't move. "Put that way." He didn't yell. He didn't raise a hand. Yet somehow every sound in the room evaporated. Even the band stopped shifting in their seats. Jimmy lowered the hat slowly. "No hats tonight. Got it." Renee, backstage, exhaled sharply. Clint leaned in again, eyes narrowed. "It's about people who don't roll over. Not about playing dress-up for ratings." Scattered applause. Murmurs. The power dynamic had shifted. Jimmy felt it. So did the audience. "I came to talk about my film. I didn't come to perform for you." Jimmy cleared his throat, trying to steady the segment. "Let's dive into the story. What drew you to this character?" But the balance was gone, and Clint wasn't done. "The world's lost its spine," he said. "Men apologize for being strong, for speaking truth. I won't." A few audience members applauded. Jimmy forced a laugh. "Well, you're definitely still Clint Eastwood." Clint raised an eyebrow. "You're damn right." And for the first time, the crowd saw Jimmy not as the puppeteer of comedy, but as a man out of his depth, grappling with a force too steady to mock. The commercial break felt like a lifeline to the crew. Lights dimmed, the band stumbled into a filler tune, and production assistants rushed behind the scenes, some giddy with adrenaline, others genuinely panicked. On set, Jimmy leaned toward the producer beside the camera. "Do we cut that segment?" The producer shook his head. "It's trending already. We ride it." Jimmy nodded but didn't look convinced. His smile was cracking. Clint, still seated, hadn't touched his coffee again. He just watched the cameras adjust, the audience buzz, and the show scramble to reclaim its footing. Renee stood silently behind the curtain, her arms crossed, her eyes calm. She had seen Clint walk into political interviews, hostile screenings, studio trials. But this was different. This was live. This was America watching a man who refused to blink. The band stopped. The lights brightened. "We're back," Jimmy said, the words sharp with nervous tension. Still joined by the legend himself, Clint Eastwood. Scattered applause. "Now, Clint, let's talk about your directing. Your eye for stark landscapes, your—" "Jimmy," Clint interrupted, his voice flat. "Are you actually listening or just checking boxes off a card?" That stopped Jimmy cold. Clint leaned forward. "You want to talk? Let's talk about why this show is more about sound bites than sincerity. About why you tried to turn me into a meme." The studio was dead silent. Phones were up. Hashtags were blooming. Jimmy blinked. "We do comedy here. We try to bring people joy." "You bring distraction," Clint said. "And that's fine. But don't drag real stories into it and expect no pushback." Jimmy tried to laugh. "So what, I'm the villain now?" Clint didn't blink. "If the boot fits." The audience gasped. Some applauded. Others booed. Jimmy looked to the crew. The producer was nodding frantically. "Keep going." "Clint, let me ask—" "No," Clint said. "You've asked enough. Now it's my turn." He turned slightly to face the audience. "You know what this film is about? It's about watching everything you believe in get chewed up by corporate PR and shiny lights. It's about fighting for dignity when people would rather laugh at you than hear your truth." Jimmy tried to jump in. Clint held up a hand. The audience hushed again. "And it's not just a movie. It's right here. Right now." Backstage, the director whispered, "Let it run. This is history." Clint turned back to Jimmy. "I've done your circuit. I've played the part. Not tonight. Tonight I speak." And he did. The crowd didn't know whether to cheer or go quiet. Even the studio lights seemed unsure, catching Clint's silhouette as if he were the only grounded figure in a set made of smoke. Jimmy, ever the veteran of unpredictable guests, reached for composure, but it kept slipping through his fingers. "Let's try this," Jimmy said with forced bravado. "The film is about a rancher, right? Tell us about the Conte. There are some amazing talents in this movie." Clint let the silence hang for a second too long. Then, without looking at Jimmy, he said, "They're not here. I am." Another ripple, another murmur. Jimmy pressed on. "Look, Clint," he said, a note of frustration creeping in. "We get it. You're not into the games, but people watching, fans of yours, they want to see the side of you that smiles, that jokes, that remembers where they first saw you ride across a dusty plain." That was it. The trigger. Clint turned. Fully. Slowly. They saw a man who didn't smile because the trade didn't call for it. They saw someone who stood up to bullies, not danced around with them. Jimmy opened his mouth to reply, but the crowd erupted, half in applause, half in stunned silence. Clint wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. His voice cut cleaner by being measured. Backstage, Renee leaned toward the director. "If they try to spin this in post, tell legal, I've already made calls." The director didn't look away from the monitor. Jimmy shifted. He picked up a card, tossed it down. "Fine, what do you want me to ask, Clint? Let's flip the script. You're the director here tonight." Clint smiled, just barely. "Then ask something that matters." "Okay," Jimmy said, matching his stare. "Why come on the show at all? If you hate what it is, why sit in that chair?" Clint didn't miss a beat. "Because sometimes you walk into the lion's den not to roar back, but to remind the lion who built the cage." That landed. Hard. Phones in the audience were everywhere. Trending topics were solidifying. Had Eastwood unleashed. Hash Jimmy cornered. Hash Legend V's late night. Jimmy tried to redirect the tension. "You ever get tired of the whole tough guy image? You ever just want to be the fun grandpa?" Clint chuckled. "I am a grandpa, but when my grandson's world is built on lies and flash, I owe him something better than silence." The crowd erupted again. Several stood. Jimmy rubbed his face. "All right then, let's get serious. One thing you've learned in the years in this business." Clint stared directly at the camera. "That most people in this town wear masks, and some masks get comfortable." He let the silence breathe. "You want honesty, Jimmy?" Jimmy hesitated. I do. Then take off yours. Jimmy froze. The crowd went dead silent again. Renee stepped forward instinctively. The camera zoomed slightly without instruction. Clint, this isn't therapy. No, Clint said, it's a mirror. Jimmy swallowed hard. And most people can't look at themselves in one. The crowd reacted with a stunned awe. For once, even the studio air felt thicker. Jimmy forced a breath. Let's go to commercial. Clint nodded slowly as if granting permission. The music kicked in. The lights faded again. But the power had already changed hands. The break wasn't a reprieve. It was a pause between rounds. The studio buzzed like a pressure chamber. Crew whispered into headsets. Audience members debated in hushed tones. Some defended Jimmy, others declared Clint had spoken what no one else dared. Hashtags exploded across social media. Clint Unfiltered, #Kimmel Showdown, #Real Talk Live. Backstage, producers swarmed. Do we end the segment here? Someone asked. Another shot back. We end it. We look weak. Let it burn. Renee stayed near the curtain, arms folded, unmoved. She wasn't concerned. Not for Clint. Not for his image. He was beyond image. What was happening out there wasn't a collapse. It was a recalibration. Truth confronting performance. Reality punching through polish. As the band faded out once again and the lights returned, Jimmy stepped back into the spotlight, but his shoulders sagged just slightly. His voice lacked the usual glibness. We're back, he said, still joined by Mr. Clint Eastwood. The crowd clapped, some cautiously, others with fervor. Jimmy sat, eyes searching Clint's face for softness. There was none. Stillness radiated from Clint like an aura, solid and immovable. I appreciate honesty, Jimmy began, even when it stings, maybe especially then. Clint nodded once. Then hear this. We don't fix what's broken by laughing at it until it stops hurting. Jimmy hesitated. What would you do, Clint, if you had this chair every night, this platform? Clint leaned forward, not aggressive, just deliberate. I'd talk less about celebrities and more about citizens, less about clicks, more about consequences. A wave of quiet swept over the audience. Jimmy looked at his desk. For once, it offered no safety. That's heavy for late night, Jimmy said. Clint didn't blink. Truth usually is. For the first time, Jimmy set aside his cue cards completely. He leaned back and looked at Clint, not as an icon, but as a peer. You think people are ready for that? Clint turned to the audience. You tell me. A roar rose. It wasn't just applause, it was agreement. A standing ovation erupted from half the room. The other half remained seated, unsure whether to clap or question. Jimmy stood slowly. Well, I think that's a show, a real one, not the kind I planned, but maybe the one we needed. He extended his hand. Clint looked at it, then took it. A rare, momentary crack formed in his stone exterior, a flicker of respect. Jimmy looked to the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, Clint Eastwood. Another wave of applause, phones everywhere. The moment had transcended the format. The show had become something else. As the credits rolled, Clint didn't rush off. He walked the stage edge, nodding to the crowd, shaking a few hands. Renee waited by the wing, calm as ever. Jimmy retreated quietly backstage. In the green room, Clint sat again, this time not with tension, but with reflection. Renee handed him his coat. You broke the script, she said. Some scripts need breaking, Clint replied. Outside the studio, the air felt different, crisper. A few fans waited, unsure if they should approach. Clint simply tipped his head once, then stepped into the night. By midnight, clips of the confrontation had crossed 100 million views. Commentators divided. Critics questioned if it was a stunt. Supporters called it the bravest TV moment in a decade. The next morning, Jimmy opened his show with an unexpected tone. Last night, Clint Eastwood didn't just visit late night. He turned it into something rare, a conversation that mattered. And for that, I thank him. He paused. Maybe we need more Clint Eastwoods. Or maybe we just need to start listening to the ones we already have. Fade out.